Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today, Lemesachtas Ksuvas Daf Mem Tes. We are going to begin on the top of Mem Tes and off the top line. So we were learning on the end of the previous daf that when it comes to the din of a Nara Hamarasa, we know if she is Mizana, the din is Skil. However, if the father gave her over to the Shluchei Habal, to the agents of the husband, at that moment, if afterwards she is Mizana, we say that there is Chenek. She does not get the punishment of skill anymore, but rather she gets chenek, and it's based on the pasuk liznais base aviha. It's only when she's mizana literally by her father's domain, but not if the father had already given her over to the shluchi habal. So on this we continue on Mem Testament Aleph Ema. Why don't we say heicha dahadru lebei nasha, when she returns back to her father's house? Hadula milsa kamaisa. Why don't we say that she will also go back to her original status? In other words, perhaps as soon as she goes back, and Rashi says, "Venu kushya kol kach." This is not really such a question, but it's just posing this as a thought that what is the status that when she would revert back, let's say if her husband divorced her or died while she was on the road, and then she goes back to her father, that does it revert back? So Merabah hu kvar paska Tana Rabbi Shmuel. This already was discussed, that she does not go back to her original status regarding Hafaras Nadarim and the like. The father does not have a yad anymore, even though Nasun didn't take place. Why? The Tana Rabbi Shmuel, it says v'neder almanu grusha, regarding the vow of an almana or grusha, kol asher asra al nafsha yokem aleha. So any isser which is upon her yokem aleha, she is to fulfill it. So matam l'omer v'lo mutseis mechlal av u'mutseis mechlal baal. So in this situation, she's left to the category of being with the father and the husband. So this pasuk is talking specifically, look at Rashi, who would be able to annul her vow that otherwise it says she has to keep it. Well, who else has the ability? We only said that the father has a right to annul his daughter's vows ad shel nises, before marriage. And the husband only has a right once they're completely married. But this girl, this armula mishinises mutzis mechal baal. So she's not in the father's domain because she's already been married. But now that she's a widow, also it's not in. Obviously, the husband can't do it; he's dead. So what is this chiddush? When do we say something which maybe wouldn't have thought otherwise, that the father does not have a right to be made for her nadarim? It can't be talking about after she already did nisuin and then she becomes an almana. It says v'neder almana. So el hari shemasar al shulchei abal or shemasar shulchei al shulchei abal when it's armula b'derech on his garsha. When it's this pasuk is saying that a neder of an almana grusha, it doesn't mean that she already had nisuin. All it was the father gave her over to the shluchei habal, and then during that process, during that time, is when the husband died. So hechani kariba beis avia shel zu or beis bala shel zu. So in that situation, do we say that like she's in the father's domain or the husband's domain? That as soon as she has left the reshus of her father, at that point he no longer has the ability to be made for, even if she goes back. So we see, based on the Tanad Be Rabbi Shmuel, that lo hadru milsa kamaisa, that she does not go back to her original status. Omer Rav Papa afanam tinina. The truth is, this is something which is derived from the Mishnah, as we saw previously. Why? Habal, it says like this: Habal naira hamarasa. If a person has relations with a girl who's a naira after her engagement, eno chayiv. So it says you're not going to be chayiv. Ashad hey naira basula marasa. It has to be she's a naira. She has to also have been a basula at the time, and also again erison. V'hi beves aviha. And the key line is she has to be beves avia, has to be in her father's house. Now bishlam and naira. Why is that a requisite? Because it's a navla bulgaris. Basula is a requisite. It's only a basula v'lo ba'ula. Marasa erison v'lo nasua, because the pasuk talks about nara marasa, not a woman who is boil after nisuin. In that situation, there would be a chiv chenek only. Beves avia l'miute mai. What is that coming to exclude? Lav, is it not? L'miute masar al v'shulchei abal. And that's what we could also derive, that's what it's actually coming to exclude. That it doesn't say nichnas chuppah. It just says that she was given. She's given over to the shluchei habal. So, Omer Rab Nachman Bar Yitzchak Afanam and Tanina Habal Eishes Ish, a person who has relations with a married woman. Kivan shenichnas rishos habal. As soon as she has entered, and this is Rashi says it doesn't say nichnas chuppah. It says she went into the rishos habal. When a suin alpha pishlo nivola, even though he didn't have bia yet, abaleh hariz a bechenek. Nichnas rishos habal ba'alma shma mina. So you see beferish that the din chenek is even if there wasn't chuppah yet. Just the fact that she has left the rishus of the father, even if she's only been handed over to the shluchei habal, not even the husband, but the shluchim of the husband, that's still enough already that the punishment that she would get for being mizana is no longer skila, but rather chenek. Okay, next Mishnah. Ha'av, technically, a father is eino chayiv, is not obligated. We'll discuss if he should, if it's a mitzvah, if it's a nice thing to do, but he's not obligated in mizanis bito. He's not obligated to provide in his lifetime sustenance for his daughter. He doesn't have to support her. Zemidrish Darish Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah Lifnei Chachamim. This was a derasha that he made on the very day that he was appointed as Nasi, B'Keren B'Yavne. And Rashi says the reason why it's called Keren B'Yavne is it's interesting why Rashi says this. Al Shem Shahay Yoshvin Shuras B'Kerem, because they were in rows just like a vineyard. That's how they used to learn Torah there in Yavne. So what was the drasha? Habanim Yirshu, Vabanos Yezainu, which is question 4. Mehem Tikana Shetiknu based in B'Tanai Ksubal Banu Labanos. So it's clear that sons will inherit, and these are actually 2 tikanos that were instituted in the based on the Tanai Ksuba, that sons will inherit the father, and the daughters will be provided with mazonos. So ma habanim, just like when it comes to the sons, enu yarshim elachar misa sa'av, you don't inherit until after the father died. So avabanos and nizonos elachar misa sa'avien. So we see that is the link, that the only time a child will get his Yerusha is only after the father died. So too, the daughters technically, Me'ikra Din, will only get mazonos, or the father's only mechuyev to give them mazonos after he has died. But b'chayav, while the father's still alive, he does not have that. He does not have that obligation. Okay, so let's look at TB4. He'im chayiva al ha'adam l'zayin ben menachasav banu v'naisav la'achar ma'isai. So, is there a chiyav to support and to give mazonos after a child, after the father has died? So, beferish, it's very clear as part of Tanai Ksuba that the banais do have to receive the Yerush mazonos. So bonos is mechuyev. Banim is not a chiyav, as we'll see. Now b'mezainis bito hud enu chayev. It's mashma that he doesn't have to give in his lifetime. The father doesn't have to give his daughters mazonos. Is that a diak hamizonos ben no chayev? Maybe that means that the sons actually have to give the mazonos even while the father's alive. For the matter, bitay nami chayevahu deleka hamitzlaika. Just because when it comes to the obligation, it's still a mitzvah to give to your daughters. So mani masnisin lo Rameir, lo Rabbi Yehuda, lo Rabbi Yochanan Broika. So you can understand it's a complex machlokas over here. Desanya mitzvah lazoynes abanos kavacham labanim. Now it's interesting. A lot of people say, "Oh, you're doing a big mitzvah. A mitzvah is a good deed," and people are like, "No. A mitzvah is a commandment." It's actually not always the case. It's actually not so completely off when people call a mitzvah a good deed. Because in this context, mitzvah doesn't mean it's an obligation. If it was an obligation, it would say it would be a chiyuv. So mitzvah over here means it's a proper thing to do. But it's not a chiyuv. It's a mitzvah l'zaynis banos. Kavacham l'banim. Why? Since your sons are learning Torah, so it's a good thing to give them food. It's a mitzvah because you're supporting them, you're helping them. So your daughters also. So according to Rameir, it's not an obligation in your lifetime to give your sons or daughters. It's a nice thing, actually the other way around, to give to your sons. And certainly to your daughters, mishum zilusa. It's an embarrassing thing that a girl's going to have to be knocking on doors. So you can look at it either way. And certainly you should be supporting my sons because they learn Torah. Certainly I should be supporting, giving mazonos to my daughters so that they don't have to knock on doors. Now, apparently, according to this opinion, it sounds quite similar, just the way you look at it, whichever direction. But both of them, for sons and daughters, it's a mitzvah but not obligation. There's only an obligation because of the Tanai Ksuba to give to your daughters after the man has died. While the father is alive, now that's mashma that there is not any obligation at all. Rashi says, "Afilu mitzvah inkan." So according to this, he's certainly the furthest out. It maybe is a mitzvah for your sons and daughters, or in this case, no, you don't have any. There's no mitzvah to do it at all. So mani masnisin. Rameir, if it's like Rameir, who said it's a mitzvah to give to your sons and daughters, not a chiyuv, or banim mitzvah, he says by banim it's a mitzvah, which is not mashma based on our case. It's mashma only. Maybe it's a mitzvah for your daughters, but maybe it's a chiyuv for your son to get to your sons. Rabbi Yehuda ha'omer banim nami mitzvah. He says that it's a mitzvah to give to your sons. Again, it's a chiyuv according to our Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan Broika fil mitzvah nami leika. He says there's no obligation at all, so he seems quite far from our Mishnah. So interestingly enough, Iboy same Rameir, Iboy same Rabbi Yehuda, Iboy same Rabbi Yochanan Broika. We can make the Mishnah fit like any of these three shittas. How? Iboy same Rameir, b'hachikam. This is how you understand. Ha'avinu chayim b'mazenes bito. So when the Mishnah began and said that a father is not obligated to give food to his daughters, so what does that mean? The truth is, we don't make a diak and say, oh, but maybe there is a chiyuv to give to your sons. No, it's not a chiyuv for the sons either. The truth is that it doesn't make any difference. Sons and daughters is exactly the same thing. There's no chiyuv during the father's lifetime. However, there is a mitzvah. It's a good thing to do. So why does he mention the daughters in the Mishnah? Hakamashma, as we continue the Mem Testament Bays, the reason why the Mishnah focuses on the daughters and not the sons, even though the din is the exact same, even when it comes to a daughter, there's no chiyuv. Ha mitzvah ika, but it's still a mitzvah for her too. It's coming to tell you that the sons are learning Torah. They're not learning Torah, so you would maybe think that there's not even a mitzvah. So the chiddush is that it's still a mitzvah for her too. Certainly, if there's no chiyuv for the daughters who are going to be embarrassed to have to find food, so certainly sons is not as big of a deal. However, it is a mitzvah to give not only to your daughters, but also it's a mitzvah to give to your sons either. Why should they have to knock on doors? That again, it's coming to the other way around. That you would maybe think it would be a chiyuv to give to the daughters. No. So again, according to the first two shittas, it's just which one is more mustaber that you'd want to support, either the son or the daughter. But the ikar din, the din is the same. By both the son and daughter, by these first two opinions, there is no chiyuv to support them, to give them mazonos. But by both sons and daughters, it is a mitzvah. Now, Rabbi Yochanan Broka, he says that there's no mitzvah either. You don't have to do anything, which doesn't sound clear from our Mishnah that he could fit. But no, you can read the Mishnah like him too. So said there's no difference. The truth is, it's not even a mitzvah. So why is mention a chayiv? Mention that's not even a mitzvah. Because we were talking about also in the Tanai Ksuba that the daughters are going to be able to get, and there's an obligation to provide for them zonos. So Tanami inu chayiv. So just to contrast the chiyuv la'achar misa, we use the language of einu chayiv in the reish of the Mishnah. But the truth is, a more precise language would have been mitzvah, but again, it wants to remain consistent in the language. Amar Rabbi Eloi, Amar Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yehuda ben Chanina, Bar Chanina, Ba'usha, and we're going to be learning now a lot of Tekanos Usha. In Usha, Hiskinu Shehei Adam Zanas Banav, there's Banaisa Kashen Katanim. That even though it may be true that technically there's no actual obligation to support and give mazonos to your sons and daughters, in Usha they said, no. We're not going to allow that. There's a takana, you need to support your children. Iboilhu. Was that the halacha? So Rashi, by the way, says, what does it mean, katanim? An shiyaviu saros. So they at least have to show signs of maturity. So once they are bar and bat mitzvah, let's say, so then at that time, there's no longer a chiyuv, which is an interesting vort. Maybe you could say the bracha by bar mitzvah, which is say bar shepatraini mi'onshi sholazeh, which certainly has to do with the father taking upon chiyuvim. But there's another patur, is that according to this, there's the takan of usha. He's no longer mechuyev to support them. Tashma. Ki hava asal kamid Rabbi Yehuda Armalahu. He said as follows: Yaroid. If you have this animal called a jackal, Yolda, and it gave birth, Va'avne Masa Shadya, and they threw a kid to the city. Kihavi, and this is what happened. So Kihavi also committed to Rav Chisda Amalhu, Kafule forced them a sisa b'tzibura, to make mortar or platform for the community. V'leikum, and get up, v'leima, and say, Urva boy b'nei. A raven takes care of its kids. Vahu gavra lo boy b'nei. And this guy doesn't take care of his kids. So basically, what are we doing? We make them feel uncomfortable, but we don't actually force them. So the halacha apparently is not like Tekanas Usha. So the fact that this guy, there was this, again, child that was not supported, Rashi explains, Yord Yeld of Avni Masa Shadya, Hatanin Hoylid Toldaisav, the Hitel Parnasasan Albnei Ir. So he basically, this person was not supporting his child. V'orva boy b'nei, so saying you're worse than a raven. So say, what do you mean? That ravens really care about their children? V'aksiv livnei oirev asher yikra'u. It says that regarding these ravens, the children of ravens, that they don't call out. In other words, the parents don't care for them. Lukasha. Ha b'chivrei ha b'uchmei. It depends if they're white or black. It says Rashi, Kishigadal mashchir, when they get older and darkened, at that time, the mother and father are fond of them. However, at the beginning, they are love on their white, and they're not loved. So it's interesting that a raven, when it's young, is extremely young, and it doesn't have the same physical characteristics, then all of a sudden it does not care about them. But eventually, when it gets older and looks like them, then all of a sudden they will support. So there is this element that a raven will support and take care of its young. However, as we announced on this machteshes, on this platform, regarding this person who was not supporting his children, that you're worse than a raven. It's good for you that your children are being basically supported from charity. Now, again, this is something which is a little bit of a degrading thing, but it doesn't mean that we're going to force them. The only time we say that there is any that this we don't force is that the parents aren't rich, and if they're not wealthy, they can't really afford maybe to give them mazonos. So there's only so much we could do. If these people could afford to give their children mazonos, so we're going to force it, then we actually will enforce the kanasusha. Kihada Rava Kafe Rava forced the Rav Nasan Bar Ami V'apik me mine dal me azuzil sadaka, and he took out 400 zuz. Amar V'Yolo Emar Reish Lakish B'Usha. Furthermore, in Usha hiskinu hakaisev kol nechasul v'vanav. If a person writes all of his possessions, everything to his son, hu v'ishto nizayne mehen, so he and his wife get mizonos from them. Says Rashi, shukayim ve'elu banav heim v'ometzim mois el matana ba'alma. So Maskav Rab Zera v'Yitam Rab Shmuel Bar Nachmeni gedoyla mizu amru, even greater than this was it said, that almanasa nizaynes minachasav, that an almana will be able to get possession, will be able to get mizonos from the asaimim. Hu v'ishto miboy, so he and his wife. Is there any question that if he gave over everything to his child, it's poshut that at least now the son at the very least should give back to the father. The Sholach Rabin Bi'i Garte, because he wrote in this letter, Mi Shemes, if let's say a husband dies, Beniach Almana Ubas, and there's a wife and daughters. So Almanasa Nizanis Menachasav. So we say that the wife will get mezainis from the possessions. This is in a situation where there's not enough for the daughter as well. Otherwise, the daughters all should get mezonos. Nises habas almanasai nizainis menachasav. That once they get married, so in that case, nises habas, the daughter gets married, almanasai, the almana is nizainis, also gets mezainis from the chasav. Okay. Fine. So again, Mishu Mesa Haniach Almana Ubas, Almanasan is in the Chas. Mesa Habas, if the daughter dies, Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ben Achaisa Yishol Rabbi Yosi Bar Chanina Al Yadi Hayamais. This actually happened. The Amar Almanasan is in the Chasav. The Almana will get Mizonos. Who Ishtim a boy? Again, the same question is, what's the question? Obviously, he himself and the wife should be able to get. Over there, there's no tircha. Since the husband died, there's no one else to provide for this almana. So maybe only in this case we provide for the almana. Maybe when he gave all the possession to his son, so he's still alive, so maybe in that situation we'll say no. The child doesn't have to give. Rather, they should get their own mizonos. Kamashmuan, no. Even in that situation, the child has to give mizonos to the parents. So what's the din? Do we hold like this takana susha regarding again, if you give all your possessions to your child, that they in turn have to give back? So Tashma, Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yona's son, Havi Kameh, Asahu Gavra, Gochin, he came. So this person, Gochin, he bent down, Benashkelu Rabbi Yona's son, Akarye, and he basically kissed him on his feet. Armalei Rabbi Chanina, my hi, why are you doing this? Armalei Kais Nechasav Vanav, I wrote all my possessions to my children, who, as we continue to Nunam and Aleph, Sinhu was Zane, and I forced his son to give mizona. Says Rashi, Kafisi Oisem B'chazaka. And Rashi says, Tarachti Alav L'chaneslo Lefnim Mishos Hadin Michaveni. So Iyam Rabbi Shlomo Lav Dina Mishum Hachi Sinhu. That's the reason why I had to force him, because the truth is that wasn't the halacha. If in fact this was the din, a sinhu boy, is it really necessary to force this? Force it? This is the psak. If that's the din, that's the din. The fact that you had to insist shows that in fact the halacha may not have been like that. So interestingly enough, the first two tikkanos that we mentioned, the first one about the chiyuv of giving mazonos to the child, and again, depending if it's a chiyuv or not, if it's a chiyuv based on wealth or not wealth, do we force them? So all of that, maybe the halacha is not like that. We're not going to force, we'll just maybe embarrass them and make announcements. Also, if you give all your possessions to your children, again, the din may not necessarily be that they have to support you, even though that's the right thing to do. Question TB 4. So is it a chiyuv to provide for them after you've died? So when it comes to your daughters, there's a chiyuv. However, when it comes to your sons, it is not a chiyuv. TA 3, Mishemes v'heniach almanu ubas. So let's say a person dies and he leaves his wife and his daughters, v'nise sabas, and the daughter gets married. Almanasai nizenis menachasav. So the almana will get mizonos from the possession. So my kamashmon, what is that? What is the chiddush over there? Umadu be'emes nizenis menachasav. Why, in fact, do we support her from these nechasim? So I got this question wrong when I did it. It says like this: Alpha pishin moitzin lamazain haisha menachasim mishubadim ubal kiloikeach dami. I really didn't do this. So Rashi says over here, Alpha gav the Amr Banan. Baal ben Nixi Ishto, a husband with the possessions regarding to his wife, loikeachavi, is considered to be like a purchaser. And the mizonos that she gets should not be able. There shouldn't be a lien on it. Here we make her like an inheritor, mishum seda de almana, because otherwise she would lose out. Okay, so let's read this over here. It's a Rashi I skipped even now. This is again TA3. So Rashi says, again, even though taking mozain from the chasim mishubadim shouldn't work, because the husband is like a lekeach. However, it says Ratam kivan shaloi haitzia haitzas dina ki yorish. We say she has the din of a yorish, mishum seda delmana, because otherwise she'll lose out. So therefore, even though the husband is really a din of a lekeach, we say in this instance he has like a din of a yorish, and therefore there is a shibud on this, and therefore she'll be able to collect mazonos in this fashion. Adkan.